She woke before the sun not because she wanted to but because hope has a way of knocking softly on tired hearts. Her room was small, the walls carried years of quiet prayers and unspoken tears. The air smelled like yesterday and tomorrow mixed together. She lay there for a moment listening to the silence, the kind of silence that only comes when life has taken so much that even pain grows quiet. She had learned early that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it wakes up slowly, rubs its eyes, and keeps going anyway. Her hands rested on her chest, feeling the proof that she was still here, that her heart had not given up even when the world had tried to teach it fear. Outside the window, the city was stretching into morning, people rushing somewhere important or not. She could never tell anymore. She used to believe everyone else had a map, a clear path, while she walked with questions instead of answers. But time had shown her something gentle and true, that most people were just pretending to know where they were going. She stood up, washed her face, and looked at herself in the mirror, not searching for beauty, but for honesty. The woman looking back carried lines not from age, but from endurance, eyes that had seen nights longer than they should be and mornings that arrived too soon. She whispered a promise to herself, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to be real. Today, I will not disappear. Her phone buzzed with a message from work. Another shift, another long day. She read it without emotion. Once there had been dreams attached to these notifications, dreams of being seen, of becoming more than survival. But dreams change shape when life teaches you to be practical. On the bus, she sat near the window, watching the world move forward while she stayed still. Reflections of faces blended with passing streets. She wondered how many of them were carrying invisible battles, how many smiles were armor, how many hearts were quietly choosing hope, because giving up felt heavier. There was a time she believed her life would be different, that love would arrive like a rescue, that success would make sense of the struggle. But reality had taught her that rescue rarely comes wrapped in romance, and success often looks like simply getting through another day. At work, she moved through tasks with practiced grace. She did what needed to be done, helped where she could, spoke kindly even when tiredness pressed against her ribs. Her coworkers admired her calm, not knowing it was built from storms survived alone. During lunch, she sat outside holding a sandwich she barely tasted, watching birds argue over crumbs. She smiled at the simplicity of it all, fighting over something small, while the sky stayed wide above them. She realized then how often she had done the same, spent her energy on what was already broken instead of looking up. Her thoughts drifted to her younger self, the girl who believed pain meant failure, the girl who thought strength was loud. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her that surviving quietly was also brave, that choosing to stay soft in a hard world was not weakness. The afternoon dragged, her body ached, but her spirit stayed present. There was dignity in showing up even when joy felt distant. She reminded herself that every day she chose hope, even when it hurt. That choice mattered. On the ride home, the sun dipped low, painting the city in gold. She felt something stir inside her chest, not happiness exactly, but recognition that beauty still existed, that life had not closed its doors completely. At her stop, she stepped off the bus and walked slowly, letting the evening air touch her skin. She passed familiar streets, memories layered like shadows, some painful, some warm. She allowed them to exist without judgment. Back in her room, she changed clothes and sat on the bed holding a notebook. She rarely opened, words were dangerous once they let feelings breathe. But tonight, she wrote anyway, not a story, not a plan, just a truth. I am still here. As darkness filled the room, she felt tired, but not empty. She understood now that miracles were not always loud or sudden. Sometimes they were this quiet moment, this breath, this choice to stay. She lay down, closing her eyes, knowing tomorrow would ask the same courage of her again, and she was not sure she would always feel ready, but she was learning that readiness was not required, only willingness. And in that willingness, she rested, holding onto the smallest light, the kind that does not blind, but guides, the kind that says you are not alone even when it feels like you are. She woke again before the alarm, not because her body was disciplined, but because her mind had learned to stay alert, as if life might suddenly demand an explanation. She lay still, listening to the soft hum of the city outside, the distant sirens, the early buses, the quiet promise that another day had begun, whether she felt prepared or not. Morning light slipped through the curtains, touching the edges of her room like a gentle question, asking, "Are you still choosing hope today?" She breathed deeply and answered without words, because some promises are lived, not spoken. She moved through her routine with the familiarity of someone who had done this many times, brushing teeth, tying hair, choosing clothes that felt safe rather than expressive. There was a time she dressed for attention, now she dressed for endurance. Comfort had become its own kind of courage. In the kitchen, she made coffee standing barefoot on the cold floor. The bitterness warmed her hands. She remembered mornings long ago when she shared this space with laughter, plans, and someone who believed in forever. Those memories still lived in her like old photographs. Faded, but present, she no longer pushed them away. She had learned that healing was not erasing but allowing. On the way to work, she noticed a woman helping an elderly man cross the street. The moment was small, almost invisible, but it stayed with her. Kindness had a way of doing that, slipping quietly into your chest and reminding you that the world was not only made of losses. At work, a new employee shadowed her, nervous eyes, eager hands. She recognized herself in that uncertainty, and without thinking she spoke, gently explained, slowly offered reassurance. She did not know that this simple kindness would stay with that girl for years. She only knew it felt right. The hours passed, filled with tasks, conversations, pauses where her thoughts wandered. She thought about dreams again, not the grand ones people applauded, but the private ones, like peace, like feeling safe inside your own life, like believing that tomorrow could be lighter. During a quiet moment, she stepped outside, letting the air reset her senses. She closed her eyes, briefly feeling the sun on her face, and remembered how once she prayed loudly, begging for change. Now her prayers were softer. Thank you for today. Please help me stay. She checked her phone during break. No missed calls, no dramatic news, just the stillness of a life that had settled into routine. Some days that scared her, other days it felt like relief. Chaos had taken enough from her, stability felt like a gift. On her way home, she stopped at the grocery store, buying only what she needed. She passed families, couples, children laughing loudly, and felt the familiar ache rise, then fall. She did not envy their joy. She only wondered if she would ever recognize her own when it arrived. At the checkout, the cashier smiled and asked how her day was. She almost answered honestly, almost said heavy, but hopeful instead. She said fine, and surprised herself by meaning it. The evening was quiet. She cooked dinner, listening to music low enough to think. She ate slowly, tasting each bite, aware of how often she rushed through life without noticing. She promised herself to be present even in ordinary moments, because ordinary moments were the ones that carried her forward. Later, she sat by the window, watching lights turn on one by one in neighboring buildings, each light a story, a struggle, a survival. She felt connected in that way strangers could be connected by simply existing at the same time. Her notebook rested nearby. She picked it up again, writing words that came without effort. Today, I helped someone. Today, I stayed. Today, I did not run. She paused, realizing how rarely she acknowledged these victories. A knock came at the door, unexpected and brief. Her heart jumped. She had learned to associate knocks with disruption, but when she opened, it was her neighbor, a woman with tired eyes holding a package delivered by mistake. They exchanged smiles and a few words, nothing more, but after the door closed, she felt lighter. Human connection, even small, still mattered. As night deepened, she prepared for bed, brushing away the day. She stood once more in front of the mirror, meeting her own gaze. She saw strength there, not the kind that never breaks, but the kind that keeps choosing. She lay down, pulling the blanket close, feeling safe enough to rest. That was new. Safety had once felt temporary, like something that could be taken at any moment, but tonight it stayed. Her thoughts drifted, not to fear, but to possibility, not grand plans, just the idea that tomorrow might carry a moment worth smiling for, and that was enough. Before sleep claimed her, she placed a hand over her heart, feeling the steady rhythm, reminding herself that every beat was a choice her body made, without asking permission to keep going. And as she drifted off, she understood something quietly profound, that hope was not something she waited for anymore. It was something she practiced every day, even when it hurt. The day began with rain tapping softly against the window, the kind of rain that does not demand attention, but asks for patience. She stayed in bed a little longer, listening, letting the sound settle her thoughts. Rain had always made her reflective, as if the sky was speaking a language she understood. She rose slowly, feeling the weight of the weather in her bones. Some days the body remembered things the mind tried to forget. She stretched her arms, reminding herself she was here now, not there, not then. Getting ready took more effort today. Fatigue wrapped around her shoulders like a familiar shawl. She did not fight it. She had learned that resistance only made it heavier. Instead, she moved gently, honoring what her body asked for. Outside, the streets glistened reflections of lights and lives blending together. She walked carefully, stepping around puddles, noticing how people rushed even in rain as if speed could protect them from feeling too much. She walked slower, letting the damp air touch her face, grounding her. At the bus stop, a child laughed, jumping into water without concern for wet shoes. His mother scolded him, then smiled, unable to hide her affection. The moment warmed her chest. Innocence had a way of surviving even in busy cities. Work felt quieter today, conversations muted by weather. She focused on small tasks, filing, cleaning, organizing things that could be put in order. Even when life felt messy, there was comfort in that control. During a break, she found herself staring at an old photo on her phone, one she rarely opened. Her younger self smiling freely, eyes bright with belief. It used to hurt to look at that girl today. It felt different, like meeting an old friend who had survived something hard. She wondered when exactly the shift happened, when hope stopped being loud and became steady. She realized it was not a single moment, but 1,000 small choices to stay, to breathe, to forgive herself. In the afternoon, a customer spoke sharply, frustration spilling without reason. It hit her like a sudden wave, but instead of shrinking, she stood calm, responding with kindness, not because she was weak, but because she refused to carry someone else's anger home with her. Later, her supervisor thanked her for her patience. The words were simple, but they settled deep. She realized how rarely she was acknowledged and how much it meant to be seen, even briefly. On her way home, the rain slowed to a mist. The city smelled clean, washed, new. She pulled her coat tighter and felt grateful for the warmth. Gratitude had become a quiet habit, noticing what remained instead of what was lost. She stopped by a small bookstore near her apartment, one she passed often, but rarely entered today. Something pulled her inside, shelves lined with stories. Waiting patiently, she ran her fingers along spines, feeling the weight of words written by people who once felt alone too. She bought a thin book of poetry, nothing dramatic, just honest language, and tucked it under her arm like a secret. Back home, she brewed tea and sat by the window, reading slowly, letting sentences sink in. She underlined a line about survival, about choosing light in ordinary days. Her eyes filled not with sadness, but recognition. Someone else had lived this too. As evening settled, she cooked a simple meal, ate quietly, and felt contentment flicker, brief but real. She allowed herself to sit in it without questioning how long it would last. The power went out suddenly, plunging the room into darkness. Once this would have frightened her, tonight she lit a candle, watching the flame dance, shadows moving across walls. She felt calm. Adaptability was another thing life had taught her. She thought about how far she had come, not in achievements, but in resilience, in learning to hold herself when no one else could. When the lights returned, she laughed softly at the sound of the fridge humming, life continuing as if nothing happened. She realized that was how she lived too, continuing quietly. Before bed, she wrote again in her notebook, today I did not harden, today I stayed kind. She closed it, feeling proud in a way that did not need applause. Lying down, she listened to the city settling into night, rain fading into memory. She felt tired but grounded. Sleep came gently, carrying with it the understanding that healing was not a destination, but a rhythm, some days heavy, some days light, all of them hers. And as she rested, she knew that even on days when hope felt thin, choosing it again was still an act of courage. Morning arrived with a quiet clarity. The rain had washed something loose in her, and the air felt lighter. She noticed it as she opened the window, letting cool wind move through the room, carrying distant sounds of traffic and life. She stood there breathing, as if learning again how to receive the day. She dressed slowly, choosing colors that matched her mood, soft, muted, steady. She was no longer trying to impress the world, she was learning how to meet it honestly. As she stepped outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, catching on wet pavement, turning ordinary streets into something almost tender. She felt a small smile form without effort. Moments like this felt like gifts, unearned, but deeply needed. On the bus, she noticed an older woman knitting, hands moving with memory more than sight. She watched the yarn transform into something warm and useful and thought about how lives were stitched the same way, one small motion at a time. At work, the pace picked up, phones rang, tasks stacked, voices overlapped. She moved through it, grounded, responding rather than reacting. She had learned that calm could be a decision even in chaos. A coworker confided in her during a short break, speaking of exhaustion, of feeling invisible. She listened fully, offering no advice, only presence. She understood now that being heard was sometimes the most powerful form of support. Later she made a mistake, small but noticeable once. This would have spiraled into self-blame. Today, she corrected it, apologized, and moved on. Growth, she realized, often looked like forgiveness practiced inward. The afternoon brought an unexpected call from a number she almost ignored, but answered. Something told her to. A familiar voice spoke her name gently, someone from her past, a connection long dormant. They spoke cautiously at first, then more freely, sharing updates, laughter. Memories. Time had softened the edges, pain no longer sharp. When the call ended, she sat still, absorbing it, not overwhelmed, just reflective. She understood that healing did not mean cutting off the past completely, it meant meeting it without losing yourself. On the way home, she walked instead of taking the bus, choosing movement, choosing presence. She passed a park where children chased each other, leaves crunching underfoot, joy loud and unfiltered. She felt no ache this time, only warmth. She sat on a bench, watching the sky change colors, thinking about how life kept unfolding even when she was busy surviving. She had not missed it, she had simply arrived here a little later than planned. At home she cooked while music played, filling the space with something close to happiness. She danced a little, smiling at herself, unashamed. Joy did not have to be perfect to be real. She ate by candlelight, though the power was on, savoring the quiet ritual. She had learned to create safety from small choices. After dinner she read from the poetry book again, letting words echo, finding herself between lines. She felt less alone knowing others had named this feeling before. She wrote in her notebook, memories surfaced, dreams she once shelved, hopes reshaped, not abandoned. She realized she was not done dreaming, just dreaming differently. As night deepened, she stepped outside onto the small balcony. City lights stretched endlessly, each one a life choosing to continue. She whispered a thank you, not to anyone specific, just to the moment. Before sleep, she stretched, letting go of the day. She felt gratitude settle gently, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. Lying in bed, she thought about tomorrow, not with fear, but curiosity. She did not need to know everything, she only needed to keep choosing hope. Her body relaxed, her thoughts slowed, and she felt something new settle in her chest, trust in herself. And as sleep came, she carried the quiet certainty that she was building a life not free of pain, but rich in meaning, one ordinary, courageous day at a time. The morning carried a different weight, not heavier, not lighter, just unfamiliar, as if something inside her had shifted during sleep. She noticed it while tying her shoes, a quiet confidence resting where uncertainty used to sit. She stepped outside and felt the day meet her halfway, the air crisp, the sky open. She walked with intention, not rushing, not hesitating, simply moving forward. On the bus, she caught her reflection in the glass, and for the first time in a long while she did not look away. She saw a woman shaped by survival, yes, but also by choice, by resilience, by a refusal to disappear. At work she spoke up during a meeting, sharing an idea she had carried silently for months. Her voice did not shake the room, did not erupt, but something important happened. She claimed space. Later a colleague thanked her, saying the idea helped more than she realized. She nodded, absorbing the moment, letting it become part of her story. During lunch she walked to a nearby park, sitting alone, watching leaves fall one by one. She thought about timing, how some things arrive only when you are ready to receive them. She remembered all the times she stayed quiet, all the moments she chose safety over truth, and she forgave herself, understanding that survival had taught her caution, but growth was teaching her courage. In the afternoon she helped a customer who was clearly struggling, tears close to the surface. She listened patiently, offered kindness without pity. When the woman left smiling softly, she felt a warmth bloom, knowing she had been what she once needed. The day moved faster now, her steps lighter, her shoulders less tense. She realized hope did this. It did not erase pain, it made room around it. On her way home, she stopped at a small cafe, ordering a drink. She rarely treated herself to. She sat by the window, watching people pass, allowing herself this pause. She thought about dreams again, the ones she buried because they felt impractical. She wondered which of them still whispered, quietly waiting to be acknowledged. Back home, she cleaned her space, opening windows, letting light in. She rearranged a few things, not because she needed change, but because she wanted it. Ownership felt different now. As evening approached, she called someone she trusted, not to complain, not to seek reassurance, but to share her day, to let herself be known. The conversation flowed easy, unforced, connection felt safe. After the call, she stood in the quiet room, feeling full in a way she did not recognize, not excited, not satisfied, simply grounded. She cooked dinner slowly, savoring each step, music playing low. She moved with ease, humming softly. Joy felt ordinary, and that made it extraordinary. Later, she sat with her notebook writing freely about who she was becoming, not who she needed to be, not who others expected, but who she felt unfolding within her. She wrote about strength learned the hard way, about hope practiced daily, about how choosing kindness, especially toward herself, was the bravest act of all. Night settled gently. She stepped outside, looking at the sky, stars faint, but present. She felt connected to something larger than her struggles, something steady. Before bed, she stretched, breathing deeply, releasing tension. She realized her body no longer felt like a battlefield, it felt like a home. As she lay down, she thought about tomorrow, not as a test, but as an opportunity, another chance to choose hope even when it hurt. Sleep found her easily, carrying with it a sense of trust in the life she was building. And in the quiet of that trust, she understood that she was no longer waiting to be saved, she was already becoming the miracle she needed. The morning arrived softly, like it did not want to disturb the balance she had begun to feel. She woke without urgency, without dread, just awareness, her breath steady, her body present. She stayed still for a moment, letting gratitude surface, not as excitement, but as calm. She had learned that peace often whispered instead of shouting. She prepared for the day with care, choosing movements that felt kind to herself. She noticed how different it felt to live without bracing for impact, as if her nervous system was finally learning safety. Outside, the city felt familiar, yet knew the same streets, but she was walking them differently. She held her shoulders back, not to appear confident, but because they no longer carried as much weight. On the bus, she offered her seat to someone without thinking, the exchange brief, but warm. She realized how naturally kindness flowed now when she was no longer empty. At work, challenges appeared, as they always did, deadlines, questions, pressure, but they did not overwhelm her. She addressed each one steadily, trusting herself to handle what came. Midday brought a quiet moment alone in a hallway where sunlight spilled through a high window. She paused there, letting it touch her face, feeling seen by something simple and constant. Her thoughts drifted to the version of herself that once believed survival was the end goal. She smiled gently, knowing now that survival was only the beginning. A coworker asked how she always stayed so calm. She laughed softly, unsure how to explain that calm was built from storms endured, not avoided. She simply said she had learned to breathe through hard things. In the afternoon, she received news that once would have shaken her. A plan changed, an expectation shifted, disappointment flickered, but did not settle. She adapted, trusting that detours did not mean failure. On the way home, she walked again, choosing the longer route, passing familiar corners where memories once clung painfully. Today, they felt like chapters, not wounds. She stopped to watch a street musician playing, for no one in particular, the melody simple, sincere. She listened fully, appreciating the courage it took to offer something without guarantee of applause. At home, she opened windows, letting fresh air move through the space. She watered plants, noticing new leaves' growth she had not paid attention to before. Life continued even when she was focused elsewhere. She spent the evening doing nothing productive by old standards. She read a little, rested a lot. She allowed herself this softness without guilt. Her phone buzzed with a message of gratitude from someone she had helped earlier. It surprised her how much it meant to know her presence mattered. She sat quietly after dinner, reflecting on how far she had come, not measured in years, but in awareness. She was living with intention now. She wrote in her notebook about the idea of enough, how she used to chase it in achievements, in validation. Now she felt it within moments like this. Night arrived gently. She dimmed the lights, creating a calm cocoon. She noticed how her home reflected her inner state, orderly, warm, intentional. Before bed, she practiced stillness, listening to her breath, feeling her body settle. She trusted this rhythm. She thought about fear not as an enemy, but as a teacher, one that had shown her what she valued, what she was willing to protect. Lying down, she felt a deep sense of belonging, not to a place or person, but to herself. Sleep came slowly, wrapping her in rest she deserved. And as her mind drifted, she understood that healing had not made her invincible, it had made her honest, and that honesty was her strength. The final morning did not feel like an ending, it felt like a continuation, the kind that understands where it has been and does not rush where it is going. She woke with sunlight resting gently across her face, and for a moment she stayed, still letting herself feel it. There was no dramatic realization, no sudden certainty, only a quiet knowing that something essential had settled inside her. She was no longer fighting the day, she was meeting it. She moved through her routine with ease, each action familiar but meaningful, brushing teeth, making the bed, opening the window. These small acts felt like respect offered to her own life. Outside, the city unfolded as it always had: people hurrying, cars moving, noise building and fading. But she walked through it grounded, aware that she belonged here not because everything was perfect, but because she chose to stay. On the bus, she watched faces again, and this time she did not wonder if they were stronger or happier. She understood that everyone was carrying something unseen, and that comparison was no longer her language. At work, she moved with confidence that did not seek permission. She spoke when needed, listened when it mattered, and trusted her instincts the way one trusts a long-earned skill. During a quiet moment, she caught herself smiling for no reason, and instead of questioning it, she let it stay. Joy did not need justification. She helped where she could, laughed when something was funny, and allowed silence when words were unnecessary. She was fully present in her own life. At lunch, she stepped outside, sitting in the sun, feeling warmth on her skin. She closed her eyes briefly and remembered all the versions of herself that led here: the tired one, the scared one, the hopeful one, the broken one. She honored them all. She realized then that choosing hope every day, even when it hurt, had not made her naive, it had made her resilient. The afternoon passed gently, and when the day ended, she felt complete, not because something big had happened, but because she had lived it fully. On her way home, she noticed a woman struggling with bags, and without hesitation, she helped. Their smiles met and parted, nothing exchanged, but a shared moment of humanity. She walked slower, savoring the evening light, the way its softened edges made everything feel possible. She felt gratitude rise, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady. At home, she opened all the windows, letting the world move through her space. She cleaned a little, cooked a little, and let the rest be imperfect. She sat down with her notebook one last time, writing not out of need, but out of celebration. She wrote about becoming, about choosing, about how she once thought miracles were rare and dramatic, and now knew they were daily and quiet. She wrote that hope had not saved her from pain, but it had saved her from disappearing. As night arrived, she turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching the city glow. She felt connected to it, all the struggles, the dreams, the ordinary courage unfolding everywhere. She thought about the future and did not feel afraid. She did not need it to be clear. She trusted herself to meet it, as she always had: one choice, one breath, one day at a time. Before bed, she stretched and lay down, feeling at home in her body and her life in this moment. She placed a hand over her heart, feeling its steady rhythm, and whispered thank you, not because everything was easy, but because she was still here. Sleep came gently, and as she drifted, she carried the truth she had earned, slowly, patiently, painfully, that she was never alone in her choosing, that every time she chose hope, even when it hurt, she joined countless others doing the same. And somewhere between waking and dreaming, she understood that her life did not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. It only needed her presence, her courage, and her continued choice to stay. Because every day she chose hope even when it hurt, and that choice was enough.